All right, so let's get into this. We're going to unpack the personal story behind clinical psychologist Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Why I Believe. And this isn't some dense academic book. No, this came from a really personal place. He wrote it because he was trying to figure out something very human. How in the world do you explain your faith to the friends you love? In that quote, that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's a dilemma I think a lot of us can relate to. You have this thing that is so real, so central to your life, but how do you even begin to talk about it with the people you cherish? Especially if they don't share that belief, without things getting awkward or weird. That one question is really what kicks off this whole journey.
So, I want to be super clear about this from the get go. This whole explainer isn't about trying to convince anyone of anything. Not at all. It's really just Dr. Cloud's personal attempt to answer a question that he says has been on his mind since he was a little kid, just 10 years old. How do I talk about this huge part of my life with the friends I love and respect so much?
So here's how we're going to walk through his journey. It's basically a timeline of his life. We'll start with this pretty incredible event that happened when he was a kid. Then we'll fast forward to his college years, where everything just completely fell apart. That's when things get really interesting, with these, well, frankly, unbelievable moments that started building his belief. And then we'll get to the final piece of the puzzle, how, as a scientist, he made all of this make sense in his own mind.
Okay, so let's jump right into those college years at Southern Methodist University. Because what happens here isn't just a bump in the road, it's a full-blown crisis that literally becomes the pivot point for his entire life. You have to understand, since he was just a little kid, Henry Cloud's entire world revolved around one thing: becoming a professional golfer. This was his life. He poured everything into it, and he was good enough to play for a big-time school like SMU. So this wasn't just some casual pastime. It was everything. It was his future, his whole identity wrapped up in this one dream. And then, just like that, it was over. A nagging injury just refused to heal, and he had to quit. Can you even imagine making that phone call to your dad, telling him that the one dream you'd both worked for your whole life was gone? Suddenly, he had no plan B, no purpose. He looked at his future, and all he saw was, well, in his own words, nothing but blackness. And look, we're not just talking about being bummed out. This was a deep clinical depression, and it came with this key symptom called anhedonia. It's a technical term, but what it means is you can't feel pleasure at all. So think about that. Even the things that used to make him happy, that he loved doing, brought him absolutely nothing. Zero joy. It's like his whole system was offline. He was just staring into an empty void.
So that's the question just eating him alive. How do you move forward when you can't even see a path? He had no answers. He was at the absolute end of his rope. And one afternoon, he just walks out of his dorm, across campus, and into an empty university chapel, feeling utterly and completely hopeless. Okay, because this is where the whole story takes a hard turn. Everything up to this point has been about loss, about his logical mind hitting a wall, but now it's about to become a journey of direct, personal, and, let's be honest, pretty startling experiences that he just can't logically explain away. So picture him. He's standing there in this big, silent chapel. He feels totally alone, totally unheard. He's done the whole prayer thing, he's tried everything he can think of, and nothing. Crickets. So in that moment, he basically just throws in the towel. And he kind of mutters this simple, almost sarcastic challenge into the empty room. So, call me. That's all he says. Just 3 words. It's like this last little flicker of defiance when you've hit absolute rock bottom. And with that, he just turns, walks out, and starts heading back to his dorm, probably feeling even more alone than when he went in. He gets back to his room, and the phone rings. On the other end is his fraternity brother, Ed Atkinson. And Ed says something like, "Hey, this is kind of random, but I was just thinking of you. A few of us are starting a Bible study. You want to come?" The timing? You just can't make this stuff up. It was impossible. And believe it or not, this kind of thing kept happening. It wasn't just a one-off fluke. There's another story where, again in a pretty dark place, he needed to find a pastor but had no idea where he lived. No address, nothing. So he just gets in his car and starts driving, basically asking God to be his GPS. He follows these weird internal feelings. Turn left here, okay, now turn right. He keeps going until he suddenly feels this undeniable presence just fill the car. It's so strong he pulls over. He looks up, and the mailbox right in front of him says Rev Jenkins. And when you look back, You realize this pattern of, let's call it unexplainable guidance, it actually started way before college. When he was just a little kid, doctors were seriously talking about amputating his leg. His mom is in the waiting room, totally distraught, when she hears this clear, distinct voice say, "Leave here and take him to Ochsner in New Orleans." So she does. And when they get there, they are randomly assigned to a doctor named Mary Sherman, who just so happened to be one of the only specialists on the planet trained in a brand new procedure that ended up saving his leg. So you have all these powerful personal moments, right? These God moments that form the bedrock of his belief. But that's not the whole story. As he's training to become a clinical psychologist, a scientist, he knows that personal feelings aren't enough. He needed to know, could this stuff actually stand up to a real intellectual challenge? Did it make any sense rationally? And what he discovered was pretty fascinating. He found that science doesn't really get rid of faith at all. In fact, it kind of sharpens the choices. See, when you ask the biggest question of all, where did everything come from, you eventually hit a wall, and you're left with two options. Option one, an eternal God outside of space and time started the whole thing. Option two, the stuff of the universe, matter and energy, has just always existed. Now, here's the kicker. Neither one of those can be scientifically proven. They both require a leap of faith. Then he starts digging into what's called the fine-tuning argument. And this is wild. You have these brilliant astronomers, like Sir Fred Hoyle, who was an atheist, by the way, and they're looking at the fundamental laws of physics, things like gravity, the forces that hold atoms together. And they realize these forces are balanced on a nice edge. If they were just a tiny, tiny bit different, life couldn't exist. It led Hoyle to say that it looks like a superintendent has monkeyed with the physics. In other words, it looks designed. Dr. Cloud has a great, simple way to think about this. He says, imagine you're walking on a deserted beach and you look down and see a Rolex watch ticking away perfectly. What's your first thought? Do you think, wow, the waves and the sand must have randomly formed this over millions of years? Of course not. You immediately think someone made this. There was a designer. Well, his point is that the universe, and a single living cell for that matter, is infinitely more complex than any watch. But for him, the real nail in the coffin, intellectually speaking, came from his own field of psychology. As he's going to his training, learning what makes people tick, he has this massive aha moment. He realizes that all these core principles for healthy life, things modern science is just now proving with research, were already written down thousands of years ago in the Bible. Things like our deep fundamental need for connection, the fact that you have to process grief to heal, how critical it is to have healthy boundaries. It was all there. For scientists, that was huge. It suggested that this ancient text wasn't just a collection of stories, but some kind of incredibly accurate operating manual for being human. So you see how this all comes full circle, right? We're back where we started. For Dr. Cloud, the intellectual arguments are solid, they're important, but they're not the foundation. His belief is built on a bedrock of real, lived experiences, from that mysterious voice in a hospital waiting room to a perfectly timed phone call that changed his life. Things he just can't rationalize away. And it leaves us with this really interesting final thought. What if the most compelling evidence for belief isn't found in a clever argument, but in a personal story?